From Reverence to Revival to Revolution. This is the first in 7 sessions. I say 7 sessions. That's to get it done by July the 4th, by the last Sunday in June, which would be the Sunday before July 4th. These are the lesson topics. And I have back there a little half sheet of paper that has the lesson topics with some of the subheadings that we may or may not get to. In the wild, I'm already looking ahead and thinking, no, I'm not going to do that way. But we'll see. But basically, this is the outline that we're going to follow. We're not going to go over this each week, but I do want you to be aware that there are scriptures that are going to be a part of this that are kind of our foundational scriptures about God being sovereign over all nations. The Old Testament and the New Testament has passages of scripture that tell us God is sovereign over all nations. Okay? He allows things to happen. He makes things happen. But he's in control no matter what. And then once again, the founding principles that we're working from are these. And this is to keep us on track. This could very easily become a course about how to turn the United States of America into a theocracy with God as the king, and you understand what I'm saying? And we don't want that. We want God to be our king. We want him to be the king of the kingdom of heaven. Right now we have dual citizenship, if you will, right? As Americans, we have dual citizenship. And so this is, now, some of you may disagree with me on this, and that's fine. We can talk about it. Talk about it after class if you want to. But I want you to be aware that God established the nation, but it's still not a theocracy. God moves, and he moves in the minds and hearts of individuals in the development of our nation. Christians, he moves in the hearts of Christians in the development of this nation. Okay? But our governmental system is still secular. Many of our laws and governmental structures are based on biblical concepts. We're going to see some of that later on. But we are still a constitutional republic. You understand? That Constitution is our final arbiter for the governmental structure and system. And we study and ponder the people and events of our nation's founding to learn from them so that we can better live as citizens in this country. Today, we're coming to America. We're coming to, well, actually, it wasn't called America at the time, but anyway, they were coming, They were coming to America. And we're going to back up a little ways.
Hey, did you allow us to sing the song?
Yeah. There you go. You know this guy? You know Colombo? One more thing I have to bring up at this point. Colombo, right? That wasn't that far off, was it? Okay. Colombo, his name means Christ bearer. What you may not know about him is that he was a very religious man. And not just a religious man, today he would be in his element because he believed that the imminent return of Christ was, within 150 years of his time. That it was imminent, that it was coming, that Jesus was on his way, and Christopher Columbus wanted to do all he could to make sure that as many people as possible knew who it was. Now, he was also pragmatic. Okay? Well, he was. He knew to get the charter, what did he have to say? We're looking for gold and spices, right? We're looking for gold and spices. But he was also, are you ready for this? He was also looking for the gold and spices, not just for the money that they would bring into the coffers of Spain, but also he wanted, are you ready for this? John, are you listening now?
Listen,
He wanted to fund one more crusade. He wanted to fund one more crusade to go in and take over Jerusalem, which at the time was in the hands of the Muslims. Anyway, that's Chris. Okay? Okay, I gotta ask. Because a lot of this stuff, I'm not gonna ask you this after every slide, but how many of you just learned something new about Christopher Columbus? Yeah, baby. I'm sorry. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to ask that question again. Okay? But that's Christopher Columbus. Let's move ahead. I'm Henry the Eighth, I am Henry the Eighth, I am. I understand that y'all have just been in this time period in your Reformation class. Is that right? Okay. Henry VIII. Henry VIII comes along, and he's kind of shaking things up a little bit. Yeah. He said, we don't need no stinking pope. I will be the pope. Okay, he didn't say it with that accent, but still, I'm going to be the pope. And so Henry VIII established himself as supreme head of the Church of England, and basically, there was no change. Basically, they still looked Catholic. They worshiped Catholic. They still followed a lot of the, there was not a huge shift. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Wasn't a big shift. Basically, it was the Catholic practices, right? But his son comes along, and his son starts changing things up a little bit and kind of shifts things over to a little bit of more Protestantism. Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Reformation a question. I don't know what he's going to say, but I think I know. Was the Church of England considered a Protestant movement? By the way, there's an argument about this. What would you say, you personally?
By the time of Edward, it was.
By the time of Edward, it was?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not it was. And part of it has to do with the fact that Henry VIII wasn't really protesting the way on religious grounds. He was protesting the Pope on personal grounds. Okay? So, Edward's bringing in some Protestant practices. Yay. Right? Okay. Well, let's move along. You're cruising through history now. Bloody Mary. Oh, what a gal. Yeah? Bloody Mary. She reverted to Catholicism. And not only did she revert to Catholicism, she reverted or killed those who didn't. I mean, those who, the others. She still remained, though, the head of the church. Even though she said, no, we're going to be Catholic. But I'm still going to be supreme head of the church. She didn't take away that title. She didn't give it back to the Pope or anything like that. Okay? And yes, there were Protestants that were burned at the stake.
So was she Protestant, reverted into Catholicism?
No, she was Catholic all the way. And she was mad at her daddy, Edward. She was Henry. And she was mad at her brother, Edward, for taking the church that way. So mad that she killed people. A lot of people. Instant.
She may have remained supreme head of the English church, but there was a parliamentary move to make both again the head of the church.
Was there? Thank you. Okay. So moving right along through our little historical jaunt, Elizabeth comes along. Queen Elizabeth. Not the one you remember from, she was old, but she wasn't born in 1558. There was a shift in title, and it was intentional. She became the supreme governor of the Church of England. And the reason is because, ooh, she loved to dance a little sidestep. Now you see her, now she don't. Because she liked to do a little sidestep between Catholicism and Protestantism. She wanted to have her cake and eat it too. She wanted to appease both ends of the spectrum, and so she kind of played in the middle. Okay? She kind of played in the middle. She had a Catholic church with their, the way it looked and, all that, but with Protestant theology. An interesting thing happened during Elizabeth's time. There's all of this stuff going on. Now, I want you to picture all this stuff going on between the Catholics, the Protestants, all of that stuff that's going on. There was a group that developed within the church called Puritans. Now, you're starting to hear a little American history, right? Puritans. But this is way before that, right? Puritans became a thing during Elizabethan's time, and separatists also developed a little bit after that. Puritans and separatists were basically the same thing, except in the way they wanted to do things. If you will, think of it this way. Separatists are kind of a subgroup of Puritans. In other words, they're a type of Puritan. Because Puritans wanted to purify the church from within and get it back to the Bible. Okay? That's fair, isn't it? Fair? Yeah? Now, the separatists, though, they said, nope, the Church of England is already shot. It's already gone too far. We just need to start a whole new church. Okay? Pilgrims were separatists. Puritans wanted to stay within the church, wanted to function within the church, wanted to change the church from the inside out. Now, I bring this up at this point because it gets serious with the kings from here on out. Because now we have King Jimmy. Okay? King Jimmy. James VI of Scotland and James I of England. Now here's the deal. Here's the deal with James. Okay? James really loved James. Okay? James thought James was pretty good. I'm just saying, James was the king. He found this concept that had been around a while, but he even wrote about it and basically had it enshrined. It was called the divine right of kings. And what that basically meant was God put the king in place, and so the king is God's spokesperson. God is acting on behalf. The king is acting on behalf of the king, of God. The bottom line is this: if the king says it, it's just like God says it. So if I say it, God said it. Do what? So he outlawed separatism. Why? If they again the church, they again the king. If they again the king, that ain't good. That makes sense, doesn't it? Sure. And he also opposed the Puritan restructuring because there were things that could happen that would take away his power. And we're going to talk about Bibles and why he wrote the King James Version of the Bible, the one that John uses, yes. But first, Charles I. He comes along, he's still the supreme governor. He and his Archbishop Laud didn't just try to dissuade the Puritans. They put in some ridiculously crazy things that caused them to leave. Okay? We're going to get to that. But first, King James Version. 2 or 3 weeks ago, we talked about the Geneva Bible as being the first Bible that had the verse numbers, right? The numbered verses, right? The Geneva Bible was the first one to do that. This is the page, the title page from that Bible. It came out in 1560. 1560. It was very popular. It was very popular. When James came around, he wanted something new. There were several reasons why he wanted something new, but one of the main ones was to control the narrative. The biblical narrative, if you will. And here's why. The Geneva Bible, this is a page from the beginning of Exodus in the Geneva Bible. One of the things you'll notice, it doesn't start, Exodus 1:1 doesn't start until right down here. All of that above it is kind of an explanation of what the book of Exodus is all about. Okay? This is in 1560 now. What are these things over here on the side? Notes. How many of you have a Bible that has marginal notes and maybe something at the beginning of the book that describes the... And you thought it was a new thing the first time you saw it, thinking, this is, yay, finally a Bible. Well, you could have had one, you know. It was an annotated Bible. It was a study Bible, if you will, in 1560. The only problem is King James didn't like some of those notes. He was fine with the text in the Bible, but he didn't like some of those notes that they came up with. For example, y'all go ahead and look at this. Look at Exodus 1, verse 19. Exodus 1, verse 19. When you look at Exodus 1, verse 19, you will note that it says that it talks about the midwives, right? And basically how they lied to keep the Israelite women safe. Do you see that? Now, we have all these different versions in here, but basically that's what it says, isn't it? Verse 19. The note that's out here, it's a little bit hard to read, but still, says, their disobedience herein was lawful, but they're dissembling evil. We don't use the word dissembling, it means lying. In other words, the note that came out said their disobedience to the who? King or Pharaoh. Their disobedience was lawful. Why would King James have a problem with that?
Because it gives a justification for them not to be truthful.
But it said that their lying was evil. So they still can't lie to the king, but they can disobey the king. Right?
You have three, you can only pick two.
That's exactly right. And he figures if I say do it, to disobey me means you are disobeying God. Therefore, it is not lawful. We cannot have a marginal note. And so that is why when King James came out with his Bible, it was actually, there is something kind of positive. There was I can't remember what it's called, the Court of Hampton or the Council at Hampton or something like that. Anyway, where the King James Version came out of it. It was said at this 1604 that we're gonna have a new Bible, right? But one of the reasons that he brought it up and brought it out at that point was because the Puritans The Puritans wanted a new version of the Bible. That one had been around since 1560. You know, it was knocking on the door of 50 years old, right? So we need a new Bible. And James, partially to appease them and say, see what I'm doing here? See what I'm doing here? I'm giving you a new Bible. And then when the door's shut and the scholars are there and everything, says, listen, here's some of the things you need to remember when you're doing your Bible. Okay? First and foremost, ain't gonna be no marginal notes about anything. You just put what the Bible says and that's it. You understand? So that's why the King James Bible didn't have any marginal notes in it. Okay? In a sense, he controlled the narrative. There were some other minor shifts and things like that in language and what have you, but overall, he was really ticked off about the Geneva Bible and what it had to say. Yep. There you go. Oh, no, there were many notes throughout the scripture. There was even another one that said basically the same thing over in Daniel, where Daniel, you know, was going to disobey the king, right? And it said basically the same thing. It was right for Daniel to do so, or something, you know, along those lines. And no, there were other notes where it could go either way. You know, it was just something that he looked at and said, I don't think so. Let's just do away with the notes. Yes, sir.
I just would like to point out that while that is absolutely true, what you're saying, he gathered together the top scholars
He did.
of his age.
Yes.
And putting this together so that when the King James Bible was put together, it was probably the finest and most scholarly put together Bible of its time.
But not only that, that is why today still it's accurate in so many ways. The only places where it's, you know, is where we have, you know, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and things like that have come out, you know, that shed a different light or something.
So that's significant though. When we
Yeah.
get the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Right.
It has made a significant difference in
Right,
some of the
right.
translations.
But you're right, he did. He brought together the very best. The very best. John's nodding. Yes. Yes. Okay. So, Geneva Bible comes out. King James Bible comes out. The Puritans are being persecuted, right, and driven out of town. Later on, we're going to talk about what they called the Great Migration of Puritans that left Dodge because of what was going on under King Charles.
But they're not the first one.
No, they weren't.
Several of the royalists were in
Okay.
Virginia
Yeah.
in 1610.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Okay, let's look at the Pilgrims. I want to spend a little time with the Pilgrims. They're our favorite separatists.
Right.
Okay? Our favorite separatists were the Pilgrims. The guy who's pictured there is William Brewster. Okay? William Brewster. I like to think of him as the first Pilgrim. Okay? Here's William Brewster's story. He was born in Scrooby dooby-doo. In Scrooby, which is over on the east side of England, pretty close to Leeds, over in that, in that area over there. Anyway, his father was the postmaster of Scrooby, and the postmaster had like a title. I mean, it wasn't a title like a sir or anything like that, but still, he was a notable figure in the town. He had land, had a nice house, right? That was where he grew up. He went to school. He went to college. He ended up in the Netherlands as an associate of the ambassador to the Netherlands that was sent there by Queen Elizabeth. So now we've got a guy, William Brewster. He is a government man, if you will, right? Yeah, he's a G-man. He's a government man. When his dad dies, he comes back and he takes over the postmastership of Scrooby. So now he has landed, he has wealth, he has a big house, right? He's a separatist. He finds out that there's a bunch of separatists that have no place to go. Guess where they ended up? At Brewster's house. Sure, they ended up in the area, but they met at Brewster's house, and some of them actually lived there. Okay? They met at Brewster's house. And so he organized them, got them all together. He wasn't a preacher, but he, set up people like Robinson to be preachers. He set it all up. To me, he's the first pilgrim. Because he's the one that organized them. He's the one that established them. He's the one that gave them a place to meet. He's the one that gave them some security just because of his position. Nobody would think that a government man who's been in the government for 10 years, no one would think that he would be subversive to the king. He's delivering our post after all. He's got clout. But sure enough, the whole time, he was putting together this group. The Hampton Court Conference, I couldn't think of the name of it earlier, 1604. King James clamped down on the religious dissenters. Okay? That's when the separatists really got in trouble. They were already meeting in Scrooby. But that's when things really got serious. And they ended up fleeing to Amsterdam. Oh, where did they go? To Amsterdam. Wait a minute. And who spent a big portion of his life in Amsterdam as an ambassador? Huh? Do you think there's a coinkydink there? No, God was working all this out. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, he's saying, we got to get out of here. I think I know where to go. He had connections. So, they went to Amsterdam. They didn't stay there long, about a year. It was hard because they were outsiders. They were making their way. They were still, working as laborers. And then they moved to Leiden, where they stayed for about 8 years. In Leiden, Brewster started a printing press. Okay? Started a printing press. Unofficially, it was called the Pilgrim Press. They printed all kinds of subversive material. Or at least King James thought it was subversive material. Because it was all kinds of things about why the king's church was all messed up. Published pamphlets, books, had them shipped into England. Ooh, that made them mad. King James, at one point, got the Dutch government involved in hunting him down because he was an enemy of the state of England. He was an enemy of the state. Got the Dutch government to hunt him down. When the Dutch government found out who it was, what was going on, and all of that, they kind of let him go. He got away from us. They said, he got away from us. We got this other guy here that didn't have anything to do with him. Said, but that's it. Said, no, that's not the guy. That's not the one we want. We don't want him. We want Brewster. So what happens next? They're doing all this publishing and all this stuff, shipping it into England, contraband, I mean, serious. And then they get ready to leave Leiden. Eventually things got to the point where they needed to go. They needed to go. They left Leiden. They went to Southampton. Where is Southampton? What country is it in? England. Is Brewster safe in Southampton? No, that's why he stayed in the hold of the ship the whole time that they were there, about 2 weeks. Never came out. Never came out. They were on a ship called the Speedwell. That's the ship that they took from Leiden to Southampton. Then the Speedwell met up with the Mayflower, and they were both going to the New World. Well, the Speedwell took on water. Those screen doors they used for the hull, that didn't work, And so it was taking on water. They left Southampton, ended up in Dartmouth, right? Made some repairs, took off again, and I drew it out this way just because that was where my map ran out. But they got way out in the ocean. And it was taking on so much water, they had to turn around and go back, and they ended up back at Plymouth. Interesting name, huh?
Yeah.
They ended up back at Plymouth. Doesn't have anything to do with the name Plymouth, where they land. Yeah. But anyway, they go to Plymouth, and that's when they kind of decided, we're just going to take the Mayflower on. It was crowded, but they got on board, and they went off. But each one of those times when they stopped, he had to hide.
He was a wanted man.
He was a wanted man. And think about it. What would have happened if they had caught him? They all would have been brought into the picture. Do you understand? They were harboring a criminal, and they would have been picked up too. The Mayflower, the Pilgrims, the Speedwell, none of them would have ever made it to the New World if he had been picked up. Brewster was about halfway across the ocean before he came out and showed himself. When they got to the New World, they established a thing called the Mayflower Compact. I expect you to read that real quick while I've got it up there.
Who wrote that?
Okay. Actually, Brewster was involved critically in the writing of the Mayflower Compact because he was one of the few that had any education, the educational background to be able to write some of the stuff. And he signed it. He signed it too. He was one of the signers. It says this. It's not real profound. Okay? It's not very profound. It's just saying we're setting out. They name King James as what? Our dread sovereign. Well, that was a positive thing, but it doesn't sound so positive now. Our dread sovereign. It's the one that we stand in awe of.
Oh.
It's that kind of, yeah. But you're right. Our dread sovereign. That's good. Okay. What they're doing, though, what I want you to catch, is that they go in the name of God, and then look at that line: for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. Wow. Wow. Okay. I'm going to see if I can wrap this up. That was in 1620. About 10 years later, King Charles has taken over. He and his Archbishop, Laud, they started really clamping down on the Puritans. They didn't want them preaching Puritan sermons. They brought out the Book of Common Prayer and said, this is the book that you will follow in all worship from here on forth. Reissuing of the Book of Sports. I thought this was kind of funny. It wasn't to them, but it's funny in light of our 20th century, 21st century sensibilities. This was a big deal. In the book of sports, they were allowed to participate in sports on Sundays. The Puritans said, no way, no way. And basically they were saying to the Puritans, not only may they will participate in sport. I mean, that's just flying in their face. And then they had to all worship exactly the same. So that began a migration of Puritans. Some 15 to 20,000 moved to the Massachusetts Bay Area. Okay? There were still about 150 Pilgrims around. Remember, they started off with 102 and it died off. They got cut in half that first winter. But now they've grown back up. Okay? And what's really funny is that the Puritans, who back in England said, we don't want to have anything to do with those separatists. Guess who they are now? They're separatists, yeah. And eventually, they worked things out so that the Massachusetts Bay Company kind of took in the Plymouth area and the surrounding area and became one entity.
The Great Migration that started under Charles I and Archbishop Laud, his man with the plan, his Archbishop man. And they started really getting down and ugly. They kept them from preaching certain things. They kept them from practicing things. They had to practice the Church of England ways. There was no leeway given. They just did a lot of things that were just rubbing them the wrong way. Actually, kind of trying to get rid of them. And sure enough, in 1630, it started. And John Winthrop, who had been working within the government, he had been tossed out on his ear for claiming the Puritans had it right, but he still had enough clout to become the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And he brought over the Puritans.
Was it an election, or was he self-appointed?
No. They were appointed. All government officials. They were disappointed as well. Did it? Disappointed.
Got it.
Never mind. I'm sorry. Got a rough room here. Anyway, so John Winthrop. He gave this sermon, okay, that has been really, it's been misused, okay? Because I want you to see what he says. This is a part of the sermon right here. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes, and you know where that comes from. It comes from Matt. Okay. Yeah. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. That city on a hill, that reference has been used by several presidents. Ronald Reagan, you probably remember, John F. Kennedy used it. Okay? Barack Obama used it. Mitt Romney and Ted Cruz, when they were running for president, used it. But in most of those cases, if not maybe all of them, they were talking about, we are a city on a hill, and we are shining out our goodness. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? In other words, it was a not braggadocious, that's not the right term, but it was a prideful thing. We are that city on a hill, and we are shining forth our beacon over the entire world. Which, okay, it's true, but that's not what he intended. What he intended was a warning. Everybody's watching that city on the hill to see if it makes it or falls. Different take, isn't it?
And well, when you boast yourself to be the city on the hill, they're still watching.
Yes, yeah, that's true. The result is the same. The result is the same. Exactly. Okay, so back up one step because we're going to talk about general colonization, not just English colonization, but general colonization from around the world. This is within the days of Columbus and back then, okay, in the 1400s. Was God golden glory? Okay? And they listed them in that order. But they listed them in that order for a reason. If you've got God's blessing, you're in good shape. No matter what you're doing, if you got God on your side, you're in good shape. That's why a lot of politicians, not so much as they used to, because a lot of politicians today, they don't do this. But it used to be, if you were going to run for office, you better be a member of a church. Or else you were written off to start off with. Okay?
Had to be the right church.
Do what?
Had to be the right.
Had to be the right church. Had to be the right church. But an interesting thing happened with the popes during the middle 1400s. Okay? They started issuing these papal bulls, these decrees, right? About exploration. And what came out of it was the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery. And basically what it said was the popes were granting permission to these people who were going out, like Columbus, who were going out. He was giving them his blessing. He was sending them off saying, please go. At times he even helped fund it. The popes were sending people around the world to lands where there were no Christians. Okay? The term that was used was terra nullius, nobody's land. And as long as you went there, you could claim it in the name of the church. Yeah? And monarchs were more than happy to do this because with the blessing of the church, yippity-doo-dah! We can go, we can do whatever we want, we're going in the name, and we gotta carry a priest with us. Okay? Gotta carry a priest with us, right? And so they started doing this and sending this out, and people came from all over Europe, Spain, Portugal, France. Even England got in on the act of the doctrine of discovery, even though they weren't bound by the Pope at this point, because Henry VIII had already said, we're done with him. Well, at the same time, there was chucking it off. But the exploration that the English did in the late 1400s, early 1500s, it was all done under this doctrine. A doctrine that lasted in our law and is still somewhat in effect, even though within the last 2 years, the Vatican has taken it out of context, said we no longer follow that. Just within the last couple of years, the doctrine of discovery. Now, I want you to think about it. You can answer this in John's stead.
If I know the answer. If I do have to wait.
When did the Crusades end?
That's a John question.
About 1300.
There you go.
1300s?
Yeah, they know.
What?
Where'd they go?
I went there, but it started to
century.
Mid 15th century?
Towards the end of the 15th
14th or 15th? You're right. Sometime early, I think it was early in the 15th, maybe, but I'm not sure. Is it in the 1400s? When did these popes start making these proclamations?
After.
What had happened during the Crusades that they were going in the Crusades? What was happening with the Muslims? They were taking over portions of Europe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's right.
They had been taking over. And then even, you go into the Middle East, they controlled everything. What did the Pope want? Land. You understand? Yes.
It's also history in the Philippines in 1521. It's further.
Same thing, same thing,
Yeah.
same thing. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. The result was, and I don't have the Philippines on here. I'm sorry, Nettie. You know, it's off my map. It's way back. It's behind me. It's behind me, back over here.
There's
Okay.
Australia.
But this is a map. I borrowed the map. I checked it. I think most everything that I saw was legit. Okay, but it gives you an idea about where that spread. This is like about the middle of the 18th century, not 1750. Okay, so it gives you an idea about where their edicts had spread. But here's what I want you to remember about this, and about what the Pope did, about everything that happened. I want you to remember this. The Pope meant it for the good of the church. God meant it for the good of the kingdom. Amen? Pope meant it for the good of the church. God meant it for the good of his kingdom. Some of the people that came, how about Alexander Whitaker? Y'all remember him?
No.
From Jamestown.
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't remember him, do you remember Pocahontas?
Yes.
She's pictured with him in the picture over there.
She's a senator, right?
No, we are not talking about the senator currently nicknamed Pocahontas. We are talking about the Pocahontas. And he is known for her conversion. Okay. He was in Jamestown. Jamestown was not started as a religious enterprise. But Whitaker's there. And what's happening? What's happening? The gospel is being spread. Just give you a couple more. How about Jean de Brebeuf? You know him, don't you?
Oh, sure.
Was in the moonlight winter time, when all the birds had fled, that mighty Gitche Manitou sent angel choirs instead. Before the light the stars grew dim, and wandering hunter heard the hymn. Jesus, your King is born. Jesus is born. In excelsis gloria. That's the first Canadian Christmas carol. It's called the Huron Carol. It's called the Huron Carol because originally it was written in the language for the Huron people. It was translated into French. Obviously, it's been translated into English. But Gitche Manitou, oh, well, you pick that up. Gitche Manitou is Great Spirit. And what he did was he went into and lived among the Huron people, and he did something that Wycliffe Bible translators do today. Even today, it's going on right now. What do? They go into regions where nobody knows anything about the gospel. But not only that, quite often they are regions in which they have no written language. Tribes, small groups of people here, they live among them to learn the language, and then they learn how to write it out phonetically, and then they translate first the book of John into their language. He was doing Wycliffe stuff, not before Wycliffe, because Wycliffe was actually older, but anyway, but he was doing that kind of work amongst the Indians. Okay? He was also martyred as a member of the Huron tribe.
Who took him out?
I want to say it was the Iroquois.
They felt threatened by him?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of that went on that we don't know about.
Oh, sure.
Because we don't like to talk about Native Americans, even
Well,
though they weren't
Bob,
Americans at the time, they were in America. But anyway.
The Iroquois were the only tribe that was loyal to England. all the other
Is that
tribes
right?
of France. That's why we have such a problem in the French anymore.
There you
About
go.
100 years later. Good point.
There you go. One more thing. The oldest church building that's still in use is where? Santa Fe, New Mexico. Okay? It's not the oldest church. The oldest church was, let me see, I got my notes here, 1521 in San Juan Bautista in Puerto Rico. Okay? And there were others. There were others. The oldest English church, Protestant church, was 1607. Where? We've already referenced it. Whitaker. Jamestown. Okay? But what does that say? The word is getting out. Again, these monarchs, these kings, Spain, Portugal, France, they were doing it for their good. God said, no, I'm in it for the kingdom's sake, and it's going to be good. These were the colonies. Since we've kind of focused on English colonies, these were some of the early settlements. Okay, and you can see the religious intent that went on there. Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth kind of became one entity. Yes.
I can give a little bit of background to that. In England, two leaders, first of all, the separatists, John Robinson,
Yes.
and the head of the Puritans that were going to be coming over here by the name of Henry Jacob, spent some time together, and in that time they talked about what church ecclesiology or what church organization should look like. And so by the time they get over into the colonies establishment, it's not too hard for them to come up. And there were good things between both of the colonies.
Right. It was an amicable
Yes.
coming together, if you will. And I was not aware of their connection though prior to. That's good. Thank you. Yeah, God was preparing the way. God was preparing the way before any of this stuff happened. Rhode Island and Connecticut, they were looking for religious tolerance from the Massachusetts Bay people. Okay. Maryland, they were looking for refuge as Catholics.
Quakers, don't forget the Quakers were in Maryland too.
Yeah. And Lord Baltimore was their, have you ever heard of Baltimore,
Maryland?
Anyway.
Ravens?
The same thing. John
Yes.
Yeah, Maryland's one place. Rhode Island was the first colony allowed Jews in. Practice Jews.
Now, one thing that we did not discuss was the Dutch settlement
New York.
in New York, right? It was in New Amsterdam, which became New York, and it was in the Pennsylvania area. The English took it over in 1660s sometime. But okay, here's something you will never forget this. Whenever you hear the financial reports, I'm going to tell you something you're going to remember every time you hear the financial reports. Wall Street. Wall Street runs where the northern wall of New Amsterdam was. It was a protective wall, and that's why it's called Wall Street. Who knew? I knew. I just told you. But a lot of people knew before that. Wall Street. Did John know?
Hey, you can't stop
I can't stop. I can't stop John. I can't stop John. I know. So the main point from the coming to America's lesson is that God first decreed in Genesis. Our first directive, if you will, was to be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the earth. When Jesus was leaving after he completed his earthly ministry, when he was leaving to return to heaven, he gave a great commission. Do you remember that? It was basically the same thing, only go into all the world with the gospel. Right? See, what was happening in all of this coming to America was God was just using explorers, pilgrims, Puritans, traders, merchants, all kinds of people, government people, religious people, all kinds of people, so that his great commission could go forward. You know? And yeah, that's why I went to the Philippines, medic. Because of God. Because of God. Okay? I got a quote for you. I'm going to close out each one of these class sessions with a quote of the day. Here's your quote of the day from John Robinson. Okay? Pilgrims pastor. Okay? When they were departing London, the Pilgrims, he said, "The Lord hath more truth and light yet to break forth out of his holy word." Wow. Think about that map I showed you, where literally the entire United States, Canada, South America, the word of God is spread into those areas.